Johnny, we're here with the House Freedom Caucus Chairman Mark Meadows. You just here at the Heritage Foundation announced a set of tax policy principles. What are they?
Well, really, we're looking at trying to come to an agreement on 4 principles in the next 4 weeks. One of those is to reduce corporate and small business income tax rates down to 20%. Make sure we do that. Have a repatriation over the next 20 months at 8% to bring some of those foreign earnings back. To look at the expensing side of things, to make sure that either it's full and immediate or at least an accelerated depreciation where we can make sure that we get the economy going again. And the last one is looking at doubling the standard deduction for individuals. We think all of that combined together would not only produce a robust economy, but it's actually could be a consensus builder here in the House and in the Senate.
Well, there's been a lot of frustration both on Wall Street and on Main Street, investors, analysts, all looking at this and saying, when are we actually going to get a plan? So you're saying next 4 weeks. Are you suggesting that people should not leave for August recess until there is a cohesive plan amongst the Republican Party?
Well, exactly. I think we need to be about the people's work, and whether it's Wall Street or Main Street, they all believe that we need to make some decisions. I think that we can make those by the end of July, but if not, we need to stay in August and make sure that we get it done. We need some certainty, make sure that we get the economy rolling again.
You know, we talked about this before, but again, just kind of based upon my reporting, it sounds like the border adjustment tax is just not going to be in the Freedom Caucus plan.
Well, it's not. And I can tell you, we can debate the merits of the border adjustment tax, but what we can't debate is there's not consensus. So that is a finite thing that has been decided. So let's move on and figure out how do we make tax reform work without it.
So it's not going to be in the Freedom Caucus plan, but it is a source, according to supporters of it, of $1 trillion worth of revenue over a decade. So how do you make up for that money?
Well, it's a great question. I think what you do is the full and immediate. You look at maybe doing accelerated depreciation, but not full and immediate, because that will lower that cost down by about half. And then the other is we're looking at welfare reform. Able-bodied adults need to work in order to get those things without dependent children. And so that's about a $400+ billion revenue. So those should offset. Those two things combined with getting rid of the border adjustment should balance it out. But if not, we look at letting them expire in year 9, where we don't run into some of those revenue neutral issues.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those revenue neutral issues. Because when I interviewed Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell the other week, he said that it has to be revenue neutral, any type of tax plan. Do you agree with him? Do you disagree?
Well, I mean, from a budget standpoint, he may be technically right because of the tactic that we're using. It has to be budget neutral. But from a standpoint, when you talk about revenue neutral, all you're doing is taking one tax burden and moving it over to something else. We need to stimulate the economy. That's not something that we have been critically emphasizing, but I think that we need to do that. So if you allow them to expire in year 9, it still meets Leader McConnell's objective and hopefully gets the economy growing at a 3% GDP.
So when you start talking about welfare, when you start talking about food stamps, obviously you're going to get criticism from Democrats, but you're also potentially going to get criticism from members within the Republican Party, several of whom are up for tough re-election fights. What is in 2018? What is your message to them heading into this tax battle?
Well, I think the message is simple, is that if we look at a work requirement, that's something that 80% of Americans believe that you should do. And we're not talking about those with dependent children or those that are truly a burden. We're talking about able-bodied adults who could work, who should work in order to get those benefits. And we're setting a low threshold of 20 hours a week. So if you look at that, I mean, that's not a high standard that most Americans, even Democrats I've found in my district, can support that kind of thing.
Well, before we get to Director Comey, I want to talk quickly about the developments on health care in the Senate. You guys were in intense negotiations with your own party in the House. Are you disappointed at what's been happening in the Senate with regards to health care?
No, I'm applauding them. Let me just tell you, I've had a number of discussions with senators. There's very meaningful dialogue and debate going on. Do I agree with all the principles? No, but that's why we have 535 members in Congress. And so as we look at that, I think that what we'll see out of that is some real meaningful amendments, some of which I will applaud, some of which I may not. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I do think we get a deal and we send it to the president's desk.
Your thoughts on the testimony yesterday from the former FBI director?
Yeah. Well, I think that it was actually a day that vindicated the president when you have Director Comey 3 times saying that he was not under investigation, where there was not only no evidence of collusion, but even no suggestion. In fact, the testimony would say that there was no collusion when it came down to some testimony with Tom Cotton and some of the others. And so ultimately what people care about is this tax reform that we're talking about, transportation. They care about the agenda.
Is the Comey stuff going to be, is the policy stuff going to be impacted by all this?
It has been impacted, but I think what we have to do is look at the agenda, what matters most to people on Main Street. If we focus on that, allow the special counsel to do his job, when we redirect that emphasis, they want to see us getting things done here in Washington, D.C. And sadly, there's not a whole lot of wins that we can put on the board.
Final question for you.
Yeah.
There has been talk this morning about the White House administration officials, the president's attorney, filing a complaint with the Department of Justice as a result of the former FBI director testifying yesterday that he was involved with the leak to reporters regarding these memos. Is that the right approach that the White House should be taking?
I'm not an attorney, but when I can say this, confidential memos should be confidential. And when you take it upon yourself to leak it to the press to get a desired result, why did we not see, we know Director Comey objected to a whole lot of things that was going on with Loretta Lynch and the Clinton Foundation and the famous tarmac thing. Why didn't he leak something at that point? Why did we choose here? I think that we need to make sure that leaks don't happen, whether it's at the FBI or the EPA or anywhere else. We need to make sure we
also need to make sure that we're protected on a cyber front.
Exactly. Listen, there's nobody who's been more supportive of that. We've got to make sure that Russia doesn't have the ability to hack into our systems. So we need to give more robust funding and make sure that we take that serious.